right, welcome and good morning. It's my privilege to welcome you here at the District Attorney's Office today to remember those we've lost, those who have survived, and continuing to fight for victims' rights and justice. Welcome to the 2022 Orange County Victims' Rights Rally. Please stand now, if you will, and join us as Pastor Simon Moon of Irvine Onuri Church leads us in prayer and then followed by a moment of silence.
It is my great honor to be here to deliver a prayer. With all our heart and all our mind, let us pray together. Heavenly Father, we invite your Spirit to come into this courtyard and fill our hearts this morning. Thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. We come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help. Father of all mercies, have mercy on us. For all those who have fallen victim to hatred and inhumanity, for those loved ones who are left behind to mourn, Lord, hear our prayer. For the mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who must try to explain the unexplainable, Lord, hear our prayer. We are anxious, exhausted, angry, and sad. I pray for those who have suffered a grave injustice, for those who have had something precious taken, broken, destroyed. I also pray for their souls that the loss which cannot be replaced will be filled with a miracle of comfort. God, you are just. You are perfect in all your judgments. You balance every scale. In time, all the accounts will be settled. All truth will be told, and all debts will be evenly scored. Heal your people's wounds and transform brokenness into wholeness. Grant us the courage and wisdom, humility and grace to act with justice. I pray that within our communities, crime victims and their families may find understanding and enough support so that with the help of your grace, their wounds may be healed and they may again know peace. Make them remember we will stand up to violence and we stand together, expressing our unity, our connection to each other. I hopefully pray that more people in our community would care about the rights of crime victims and their families, and that we would all keep our eyes and ears open for those who need help. I ask that you would use us to save lives, restore hope where it has been lost, and work to bring about change where it is needed. As we live together on this fragile planet, Lord, give us grace, give us courage, give us compassion, and give us hope. In your mighty name, amen. So let us pause for a moment of silence.
All right, thank you. Pastor Moon, please stay with us. Please remain standing, folks, as we invite Chief Walters of the Orange County District Attorney's Bureau of Investigation forward. He'll call to attention the Orange County District Attorney's Honor Guard, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will be blessed with Pastor Moon singing the national anthem at the culmination.
Honor Guard, post. If you could please all put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stars and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombers seen in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. For those of you who don't know, my name is Sean Nelson. I am blessed to be the Chief Assistant District Attorney here at the DA's office. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, benefactors, and volunteers who've helped to underwrite and support this event. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Orange County Sheriff's Department and the Santa Ana Police Department for their time and support in coordinating this event. I'd also like to thank the Association of Orange County Deputy Sheriffs, Civic Action Committee, the Orange County Attorney Investigators Association, the Orange County Board of Supervisors, the Orange County CEO's Office, and Waymakers for their generous donations. Thank you. It's my pleasure now to acknowledge some of our elected officials and dignitaries who have joined us in empowering the victims and continuing the fight for victims' rights this morning. If you could hold your applause to the end. Up front, we have our Congresswoman Young Kim, Orange County Board of Supervisors Chairman Doug Chafee. Welcome, sir. Of course, our District Attorney Todd Spitzer, Clerk Recorder, and my former assistant basketball coach Hugh Wynn. True story. Santa Ana Mayor Pro Tem Phil Becerra, Newport Beach Councilwoman Diane Dixon. I see Newport Beach Council member Kevin Muldoon, and San Clemente City Councilman Steve Knobloch. Also, we have representatives from the following offices: United States Congresswoman Michelle Steele, Senator Josh Newman, Assemblymember Lori Davies, Assemblymember Stephen Choi, Supervisor Katrina Foley, Supervisor Lisa Bartlett, and Rhonda Reardon, assistant to Pat Bates, our senator. Welcome, folks. Let's have a round of applause for our elected representatives. Thank you for being here and supporting our victims. Police chiefs this morning, and welcome all of you. We have Fountain Valley Police Department Chief Matt Shepard, Huntington Beach Police Department Chief Eric Parra, La Habra PD Chief Adam Foster, Orange County Police Department Eric Rosauer, Placentia Police Chief Brad Butts, Tustin Police Department Deputy Department Chief Bob Wright, Westminster Police Department Chief Cameron Nauerhays, California Highway Patrol Assistant Chief Don Goodbrand, and we also have representatives here from the following law enforcement agencies: the DEA, Anaheim PD, Brea PD, Buena Park PD, Fullerton PD, Garden Grove PD, Huntington Beach PD, Irvine PD, Laguna Beach PD, La Palma PD, Orange County Sheriff's Department, Santa Ana PD, Seal Beach PD, Tustin PD, University of California Irvine Police Department, Westminster PD, CHP, Cal State Fullerton Police, and our probation office for the County of Orange. To all our friends and ladies and gentlemen who took the time here today in uniform, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for joining us this morning. Now it's my privilege to invite forward to the podium the Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Doug Chafee. Supervisor, welcome, sir. Thank you for being here.
As Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, it's my special pleasure to join the District Attorney, the Sheriff, local law enforcement, public safety officials, and all our crime victim advocates in recognizing National Crime Victims' Rights Week. The 2022 National Crime Victims' Rights Week falls between April 24th and the 30th. This year's theme is Rights, Access, Equity for all victims. The theme underscores the importance of helping crime survivors find their justice by enforcing victims' rights, expanding access to services, and ensuring equity and inclusion for all. We're here today to honor victims of crime. It is easier to address the physical aspects, but hard to address the emotional aspects of crime, the sense of loss, the anger, and the deep hurt. The county is doing everything we can to encourage helping victims of crime relieve the suffering that they are enduring, that not everyone sees because it is deep within. Thank you all for coming and standing with our victims of crime. In the fight for justice, especially for victims of crime, we must all stand together. Thank you.
And now I believe we have a presentation by Senator Pat Bates. Rhonda, welcome forward. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be here and represent Senator Patricia Bates, former member of the Board of Supervisors, so this is familiar territory for her. And so, District Attorney Todd Spitzer, I would like to read this, if it's okay with you. Commemorating the 2022 Crime Victims Rally, honoring all victims and survivors of violent crime. We are all better and stronger together in supporting members of our community in celebrating our rights, access, and equity for all victims. while sharing stories and honoring the bravery of victims of violent crime. We thank you, DA Todd Spitzer, for hosting this ceremony that honors the victims of crime and their loved ones. On behalf of Senator Patricia Bates, who personally signed this certificate, thinking of you, Todd, Senator Bates wishes you the very best and mourns and really feels for the victims, and she's also been one as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, we can take a picture? I don't know. I don't see her. It's okay. We'll go off to the side.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, we'll go off to the side. No, we'll go there. He's going to introduce you. Yeah. John's going to introduce you.
Thank you, Rhonda. At this time, we're going to turn to our monitors. Sheriff Don Barnes is at a National Sheriff's Conference, so he's unable to be with us in person. But we do have the benefit of his words that he's going to share with us by way of video. And I'd just like to take a moment, as you notice, something different. If you were here last year, our Crime Victims Monument has been placed here in the courtyard. We didn't have the pleasure of enjoying this last year, but with the cooperation of the Sheriff's Department, who is our partner in this side of the courtyard, we now have this for the rest of our days. So thanks to the Sheriff. Let's hear from Sheriff Barnes.
National Crime Victims' Rights Week is an opportunity for us to stand together in support of those who have had their lives impacted by crime. Now more than ever, crime victims need a voice. As law enforcement, we encounter people every day whose lives have been forever altered, in big ways and small. We remain dedicated to the vigilant pursuit of justice and will continue to hold accountable those who choose to victimize members of our community. In California, our laws continue to favor criminal offenders over victims, sadly resulting in more residents being impacted. It is imperative that we unite in words and action to advocate for victims of crime. Thank you for your partnership in keeping Orange County safe.
Thank you, Sheriff Barnes. At this time, it's my privilege to introduce Patricia Wenskunis. Patricia is the founder and CEO of Crime Survivors. Over the last 19 years, Patricia has channeled her experience of victimization into one of survival. Crime Survivors has been fighting to have the voices of victims heard. As a statewide co-chair of Marshy's Law, Patricia Wenskunis was one of the first proponents of California's Victims' Rights Bill. For nearly 2 decades, Crime Survivors has stood next to the survivors of crime and their loved ones and provided them love, support, and hope on their road to becoming a survivor. Patricia, welcome forward.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Let me start by thanking District Attorney Todd Spitzer. We've known each other now for over 20 years. Todd was the very first person that I actually went to when I survived attempted murder, to ask him to help and to support and to listen, to be able to bring justice to victims and survivors, and to bring service providers together, including law enforcement, nonprofits, individuals in the community. And he was the very first person that listened and heard me to be able to make a difference in our community. So as the founder CEO of Crime Survivors, thank you, Todd Spitzer. As a survivor myself, thank you for being there all these years. I appreciate and value our collaborative partnership, our friendship, our relationship, and to witness what you do for our communities day in and day out. With that said, I want to go ahead and start with a short reading. My memory has so many different sections, and like all survivors, there are so many compartments with so many triggers. I'll remember a smell, which reminds me of a man, which reminds me of a place, which reminds me of another man who I think was with a woman who had a certain smell. And I'm back to square one. This is the case for most survivors, I believe. When we try to put together our past, the triggers are many and varied. The memories are disjointed, and why wouldn't they be? We were children, we were adults, We were women, we were men, we are individuals. Even someone with an idyllic childhood who is only trying to remember the lovely things which happened to them will scratch their head and wonder, who gave them that doll? And was it for Christmas or their 3rd birthday? Did they have a party when they were 4 or 5? When did they go on a plane for the first time? You see, even happy memories are hard to piece together. So imagine how hard it is to collate all the trauma, to pull together all the things I've been trying to push away for so many years. That is by Lori Matthew. And I just wanted to share that as I started today, to be able to speak to all of you. As I stand next to the Crime Victims Monument, as we celebrate and bring in National Crime Victims' Rights Week, as I look at all of you, including law enforcement, service providers, survivors, community members, elected officials, coming together for victims and survivors and family members. National Crime Victims' Rights Week, it is about all victims of violent crime. It's about victims that are no longer here, that have been traumatized, tragically murdered within our own communities, within our own families, within our own friendships, within our own workplaces. It's about the survivors that are left behind from those victims that were murdered, that are trying each and every day to cope, to deal, to heal, to find a light at the end of their day, to never forget their loved ones, the memories of them. They have to sit at a table every holiday season to be able to have a missing place setting. They have to celebrate birthdays with their loved ones that are no longer with us. Today is also about survivors of rape, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, human trafficking, domestic violence, attempted murder, all victims of violent crime. This monument here is to be able to have all victims of violent crime to be able to come to a place to feel empowered, strengthened, a place of solace. And you know, I have to say, I've been doing this now for 20 years. April 4th of 2002, my personal trainer came into my house and drugged me, wrapped my face and head in saran wrap, beat me black and blue, screaming to kill me and my son. I got in this movement to make it better for victims and survivors in our community. And most days I feel like a failure in 2022 because I witness and I see what's happening through our legal process and our legal system. And I thought, well, should I get any kind of negativity today? Because I'm not a negative person, but I am a voice for the voiceless. And I have to share my voice not only as a survivor, but a community leader. And I have to be able to call on our elected officials to be able to fund law enforcement, to be able to fund district attorneys, to be able to empower and strengthen our community members that are out there sacrificing day in and day out for victims and survivors and to keep us safe. And we must not forget, especially the individuals that are back here that are fighting for us day in and day out, to collect the evidence, to get an arrest, to get a conviction, so that victims do matter. Victims matter. We need to stand up and speak up. We need to balance the scales of justice. Yes, we need rehabilitation, but we need an overhaul on our system. Because when we get to 2022 and the offenders and the criminals have more rights than the victims, we're losing this battle. We're losing what this monument means. It means for all victims of violent crime to get their rights, their Marsy's Law rights, to be able to get justice, to be able to get resources. There are many organizations here today, Waymakers, Get Safe, Parents of Murdered Children, many victims groups that are sacrificing day in and day out for these victims and survivors. We are better and stronger together. We need to come together to make a greater difference and an impact, and to make sure that we all know victims matter. Whether it was in 2002, 2015, 2022, 2025, 2030, we need to stand united together so that victims have hope and healing to be able to survive and thrive. And I want to be able to end on today with a short quote as well. And I just also want to thank you. Thank you for being here today, because your presence does make a difference and an impact. And we are going to be stronger together after today, after National Crime Victims' Rights Week. We only have a week. It's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, Child Abuse Prevention Month. The 27th is Denim Day. But we need to bring light to this 365 days out of the year, because victims are victims 365 days out of the year, and we're going to be in business as long as I know, as long as I'm breathing. I made a promise that I'm going to continue to sacrifice and do what I'm doing, and I ask that you join our movement that victims matter. Violators cannot live with the truths. Survivors cannot live without it. There are those who still once again are poised to invalidate and deny us. If we don't assert our truth and our voices, it may again be relegated to fantasy. But the truth won't go away. It will keep surfacing until it is recognized and acknowledged. Truth will outlast any campaigns mounted against it, no matter how mighty, clever, or long. It is invincible. It's only a matter of which generation is willing to face it, and in so doing, protest future generations from ritual abuse. So please join me in celebrating National Crime Victims' Rights Week to bring rights and a voice to victims. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Patricia. It's now my honor to introduce Renetta Johnson of Waymakers. Waymakers provides victim advocates to the victims in our cases, helping them to navigate the court process and ensuring the victims' voices are heard in the courtroom. Welcome, Renetta.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for being here today. I'm the CEO of Waymakers, and I have been involved in supporting victims' rights for over 25 years. We pursue rights, access, and equity for victims through the lens of Waymakers' values of respect, compassion, empowerment, and collaboration. Each day we strive for an environment that reflects and celebrates the diverse voices of the communities that we serve. We endeavor to assure that our services are accessible to everyone. We are sensitive to the many ways that identity and life experiences facilitate or impede a person's options, and we strive to mitigate those concerns. We work to uphold a victim's rights as they make their way through crisis to a place of strength and stability. We have the great honor of working with our criminal justice partners like the District Attorney's Office, local law enforcement, and in cooperation with our strong nonprofit partners such as Crime Survivors, our local domestic violence programs, POMC, Get Safe, and a myriad of others who are represented. Through this, Waymakers victim advocates provide steady support for survivors of crime. In our work, we focus on individualizing services. As you will hear this morning, each situation is different, and meeting the needs of each individual is essential to fulfilling our mission. One such client I'll call Karina. She was sexually assaulted from the age of 11 through 13. Over a decade later, Karina found the courage to report the sexual abuse, and in doing so, she helped others find their voices as well. You see, Karina was not the only victim of those perpetrators. The Deputy District Attorney handling her case referred Karina to Waymakers. While she was determined to attend every court hearing, the prospect of seeing those that had hurt her so badly left her shaking, anxious, and emotional. Waymakers helped Karina through finding therapy for her, providing support groups through Waymakers, other workshops, and we provided accompaniment with her to every court proceeding. Through these therapeutic and empowering experiences, Karina took back her power. Today, she shares her story as a survivor in a voice that is confident and strong. Waymakers has been serving victims of Orange County for nearly 45 years. We do so with great sorrow that our services are needed, but also with great joy that we're the ones who have the honor of walking side by side with some of the bravest people we know. Thank you for sharing your support of crime victims by attending today. We appreciate it.
Now I'd like to turn our attention to one of our featured speakers today. It's my honor to introduce Jenner Silva. His father, Eliu Gramajo, was tragically murdered on Father's Day, 2016. He was working his food truck in Santa Ana. Jenner is joined by Senior Deputy District Attorney Janine Madera, who prosecuted his father's killer. A third striker gang member parolee was found guilty last month of the special circumstances murder for shooting and killing Eliu while targeting another rival gang member. The murderer saw his rival gang member from a distance while buying something from Eliu's food truck and fired his gun 5 times at that rival gang member. The shot missed his intended target and instead hit Eliu, an innocent bystander, husband, and father of 3. Eliu died at the hospital. His killer will be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole on July 15th of this year. Jenner's here today to talk about his dad, his journey through the criminal justice system, and share other remarks with us. Jenner, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hello, my name is Jenner, and on June 19th of 2016, we lost my father due to gang violence. All he was doing was working to provide for us. It was my first day as a dad and his as a grandfather. It's been tough taking my 6-year-old to the graveyard and telling her, "This is your grandfather." She asked questions that I often don't have the answers to. She asked me, "Dad, why is there bad people in this world? Why is Grandpa dead? Why did somebody shoot him?" I can't answer those questions. It's been almost 6 years and it still feels unreal, like a nightmare. Every Father's Day since this happened hasn't been the same. Going through trial felt like a Band-Aid was removed. When we lost my father, I felt like I couldn't grieve because I had to be strong for my mother, my brother, and sister. I had to arrange my father's funeral at the age of 25, which is something that I never imagined doing. Going through trial, I felt emotionally, physically, and spiritually drained. I think the hardest part was sitting in the same room with the person who killed my father. There were nights that I would wake up at 3, 4 a.m. in the morning and just replay in my head what happened in court that particular day. Sitting in court was difficult. I would hold back tears when I heard details about what happened, or seeing pictures of my dad while he was being attended by the paramedics, because I didn't want to look weak in front of the killer, in front of his family. But to be honest, there were days I would get off work and just cry all the way home. I miss my father. I love him. Although trial was very difficult, it helped me grieve. And it's not exactly closure, but it is a relief to know that the killer will pay for what he did. Through this process, it's been difficult, but I'm thankful that people that I don't know have helped me out the most. There's people in my family that I expected them to help, and that didn't happen. I'm thankful for those that I don't know, and they still reached out to help. I thank Grace, I thank Janine Madera, my wife, for being there every step of the way. But most importantly, I thank God for putting the right people in my life to get through this journey and in my family's life. It's not been easy going through this journey. It hasn't. But one thing that has helped me has been God. He has been giving me strength every step of the way to not have hatred in my heart. That is a prayer I would have to do every morning before I would go to court. I don't want hatred in my heart. It's not easy, but God has helped me, and I know He will help each and every one of you. Thank you.
Jenner, thank you for sharing with us, and thanks to Janine for helping bring justice to that family. It's now my honor to introduce Carol Gomez, mother of 31-year-old Jesse Gomez, who was tragically murdered on December 19th, 2018 by a documented gang member. Carol is joined by Deputy District Attorney Harris Sadiq, who prosecuted her son's killer. Jesse was an innocent victim who was shot to death by a gang member while he walked to get some tacos from the local food truck before a Sunday night football game. Jesse and his uncle started walking toward the taco truck, but his uncle was sidetracked by a neighbor, and Jesse had walked ahead alone. As Jesse neared the taco truck, two men approached Jesse. There was a short conversation and a struggle. Shortly after being approached, the documented gang member took out a gun and shot Jesse 3 times. Jesse knew he'd been shot and walked 15 yards until he was in front of the taco truck. Jesse tried to ask for help, but none of the customers at the taco truck came to his aid. Jesse had dialed 911, but he was unable to speak. He collapsed and died there in front of that taco truck. After Jesse collapsed, one of the bystanders picked up his phone and reported the crime to Santa Ana police. Jesse's uncle Samuel heard the shots and ran to his dying nephew. Another uncle, Richard, rushed to his side. Their efforts to resuscitate Jesse were unsuccessful. Jesse was unarmed, had no documentation as a gang member whatsoever. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jesse's killer was found guilty of first-degree murder in October of 2021, as well as robberies with a gang enhancement for crimes he committed 15 minutes prior to that same murder. He's facing a maximum sentence of 35 years to life, plus 35 years. The Gomez family has asked that our District Attorney Harris Sadiq share their story with you today. Harris?
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here with us today. Today, I am privileged to honor the life of Jesse Gomez, a 31-year-old young man whose life was taken far too soon. Joining us here today, and it's here on stage, is Carol, Jesse's mom. Like many of you, the wound is still too fresh, and the Gomez family cannot talk publicly about what happened. But over the past few years, through our investigation, through our successful prosecution of Jesse's killer, I've gotten to know the Gomez family and learned a lot about Jesse. Jesse was a son, he was a cousin, he was a friend, and he was so much more to those who loved him. Jesse loved to laugh and make those around him happy. Jesse enjoyed watching football, and the family's last memory of Jesse is Jesse watching his favorite football team, the Dallas Cowboys. On December 19th, 2018, Jesse was celebrating an overtime victory by his Cowboys over the Eagles. He was ecstatic. His uncle described the smile on Jesse's face and how happy he was. But little did his family know that that would be the last time they saw Jesse alive. Just minutes after the game ended, Jesse decided to walk to the neighborhood taco truck. The taco truck was just 1.5 miles away from his home. Just a few minutes after Jesse left the house, shots were fired and Jesse was killed by a gang member living in Santa Ana. Because the taco truck was so close to Jesse's house, Jesse's family actually heard the shots that killed Jesse and instinctively knew that something was wrong. Jesse's two uncles ran to his side, but by the time they got there and tried to resuscitate him, it was too late. Jesse was gone. Like many of us who live in these communities, Jesse's family was aware of the gang presence in their neighborhood, but they weren't involved in gangs. Jesse was not a gang member. They thought they could be free of gang violence, but unfortunately, they found out the hard way that gang violence stops for no one. Jesse was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. Jesse's murder was solved by the Santa Ana Police Department, and specifically Detective Frank Gomez. Detective Gomez went door to door talking to community members, asking for answers, until a few brave citizens came forward and talked about what they saw that day. Without their help, this case would have never been solved, and justice would not have been attained for Jesse. So for those of you living in these communities, we urge you to come forward. Talk about what you've seen. Talk about what you hear. Because without your help, we won't be able to end these senseless gang crimes. The Gomez family's journey towards healing has just begun, and it'll continue throughout their lives. But they've continued to live each day honoring Jesse by making people happy, making people laugh, and doing as Jesse would. So today we honor Jesse and other victims of senseless violence. We thank you all for being here, and we continue to do our part at the District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Thank you to the Gomez family, and thank you, Harris, for all the work you did to bring justice to that family. It's now my honor to introduce our next speaker, Lynette Duncan. Lynette's been involved in criminal justice for more than 45 years. She's joined by Senior Deputy District Attorney Mark Karras. In 1977, Lynette had to tell her 11-year-old sister their father, Aubrey, had been shot and killed in their doorway. Their older sister, Denise, was dead, and their mother, Nadine, was shot and injured. That's the day she learned the boogeyman existed. Evil was real, and his name was Brett Thomas, Duncan said. Thomas, then 18, and Mark Titch went on a 9-day killing spree, murdering 4 innocent strangers. Aubrey Duncan, 53, Denise Duncan, 18, Ephraim Christian, 35, and Laura Stoughton, 20, during robbery or burglary attempts in Orange County. These murders occurred 1 year before the death penalty was enacted in California. The prosecutor at the time allowed the inmate to plead 3 counts of first-degree murder, all to be served concurrently. Any extra counts would not have resulted in any extra time, and at the time everyone thought this was a true life sentence. The first hearing for parole was in 1983, almost 7 years from the day from the first murder. He has now had hearings in 1983, 86, 89, 92, 97, 2001, 2008, 2012, and 2015. The inmate has now had 10 parole hearings. Lynette has been to them all, and so has the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Lynette's here to share her story.
Thank you. And thanks for going through all of that. That makes my job a lot easier. I don't know if I should be really excited to see so many people here or devastated to see so many people here, because I know you've all been touched by violence. So he described my life pretty much. At 17, my 11-year-old sister and I had to jump over my dad and sister's bodies to run to safety at the neighbor's house about 4 in the morning. At that time, there was no Office of Victim Services. There wasn't even companies that cleaned crime scenes. Men in my church cleaned it up. There was no PTSD. It was not a diagnosis. We were so on our own. My mom had been seriously injured. She was in the hospital for 9 days, and during that time, not a single therapist showed up in her room. You didn't do therapy. It wasn't offered. You were just supposed to fend for yourself. And, you know, as relatives told me, you weren't hurt. What's your problem? The night of the homicide, like I said, I was 17. My sister was 11. We were at the neighbor's house. She had run into their back bedroom where a couple of her little girlfriends stayed. It was their bedroom. I was just in shock in the living room. And the cop finally came up to me and told me my dad and sister didn't make it, but my mom was going to be fine. I was still processing that when he said, now go in the back bedroom and tell your little sister. Yeah, you shouldn't have to do that, ever, especially not at 17. There was no team that came out back then. Like I said, there was just no victim services whatsoever. I remember walking back into the back bedroom, and I saw her little friends, but I didn't see her. And I asked, where's Donna? And they just pointed to the bedroom closet. She was hiding in a fetal position, just trembling. 38 years later, she finally wrote her victim impact statement to be read at one of the parole hearings. And in it, she started out by saying, that's the day that I learned that monsters were real and daddies don't always kill them. It broke all our hearts hearing that. As I said before, PTSD was not a diagnosis. You didn't do therapy in the 70s. And I spent my 20s really just trying to find some man to rescue me. I spent my 30s rescuing myself. I recommend that version, by the way. So as a single mom, recently divorced with 2 babies, I went to grad school, moved to Minnesota, and studied prosthetics. While there, I had to take a psychology class as part of the prerequisites. Now PTSD was a diagnosis. And my textbook had dedicated a whole half page to it. And I remember reading my homework. I was so glad I was home and not in the middle of class, because I read this and screamed out, I've got that! Maybe I should get some therapy. And that's when I started getting therapy. And that really helped a lot. I recommend therapy to everyone. If you don't find the first therapist that works well with you, find another one. That's why there's so many. Everyone needs something different. My next big healing phase happened also while I was in school. For years, I had lived with hate and fear. When you don't feel safe in your own home, you really don't feel safe anywhere. And I was always looking over my shoulder, who's going to murder me now? Because sometimes you're not just that story on the news that happens to other people. I remember 10 years after the homicide, I was still in Orange County at the time, and I was in such physical pain because the hate was just eating at my soul. I remember praying to God one night, just let this hate go away. And it did. It lifted immediately. But it was replaced with just numbness. And I didn't feel anything for another 10 years. And then here I was in grad school, and we had a day off of school. It was Columbus Day or something. And I had a lazy day, which usually I didn't have because I was a full-time student, full-time mom, and part-time employee. But I gave myself that lazy day. And I was on the sofa with the remote going from talk show to talk show. This was pre-Jerry Springer, by the way. This was Oprah, Donna Hugh, Sally Jesse. There was a guest on the talk show. His name was Brooks Douglas, And 20 years earlier, when he was 17, he went through a very similar crime, random armed robbery at his home. His whole family was shot. Him and his sister survived. His parents didn't. And I knew that that man was on TV to speak to me. He was probably speaking to a lot of other people, but here was the first time I ever saw someone who had a story similar to mine. And I just listened. And he did a lot more with his life. He became a lawyer and a state assemblyman in Oklahoma and started passing laws on victims' rights. And he was able to meet with one of the assailants, and they spoke for a couple hours. The assailant knew he was a monster in his younger years and knew he had to pay his debt to society, and he was fine with that. And this man, Brooks Douglas, was able to forgive him. And that was the first time I knew that that was even possible. I mean, people at church would tell me I had to forgive, but these are people who've never been through hell in their life. And I didn't think there was a possibility for this, because I had just so much fear and hate and pain and suffering. Well, I didn't know what to make of this. Am I supposed to go to California and meet with the assailant? At that time, I didn't even know if he was still incarcerated. Remember, there was no Office of Victim Services. I know now you fill out a form. There was no form in '77. So I finally passed it off as a coincidence. And then a month later, I had another day off from school, another lazy day. There's the same guest on another talk show. And I'm going, I've got to figure this out, or this poor man is going to be on a lot of talk shows until I do. So that day, I prayed all day. I prayed, I meditated, I pondered, I talked to myself a lot. I really did a lot of talking to myself. And I realized that this man wasn't 18 anymore, as I wasn't 17. Perhaps he's changed. Maybe he hasn't. It doesn't matter. It's no longer my job to hate him. My hating this man had not affected his life at all. He didn't even know I existed, but it destroyed mine. So that day, I turned in my notice and walked out the door. My job was done. I remember looking out the window. Oh, also, another thing I figured out on that day was that justice and forgiveness are two different things. I never knew that. The word forgiveness is so convoluted, and I knew it was important because every major religion discusses it, from Christianity, Judaism, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist. They all have it as a major tenet. But I didn't think it was possible for a homicide. But it is. And I remember looking out the window, and the sky was bluer, and the grass was greener. And I remember thinking, is this how everyone else lives? Because this is a whole lot easier. Fast forward another 12 years. I think I was at must have been 14, I was at the 34-year mark. And I thought I was doing well. I mean, hey, I was functional, yay. Sometimes that's all you can hope for. And I was working in prosthetics. I was living in Maryland, far away from Orange County. No offense to Orange County, but that's where the homicide occurred. So I'm doing better when I don't live here. So I was in Maryland, and I had a patient come in. And I'm evaluating him. We're talking, and I found out that a year previously, his family went through a random armed robbery, home invasion. And their 40-year-old daughter, who was spending the night, was shot and killed. And I'm like, oh my God. Let's just say that should have been 1 hour appointment, turned into 2 hours, all during lunch. We just talked. We talked to each other. We weren't alone. And it was finally the first time I talked to a homicide survivor like me. Well, he eventually, like the next time I saw him, told me about a brand new homicide survivor support group chapter. It was a POMC, Parents of Murdered Children, that had just started up in Maryland. And their second appointment was that night. And it was meeting a mile from my house. And I'm like, I could go to that? Yes, you can. Well, I'm gonna go to that. And I figured, I was doing well. I helped this family. I can help other people. So I went to this meeting, and I told my story. By the way, I don't think they mentioned my mom was seriously injured during this homicide. So I was pretty much alone, and I also had to plan my family's funeral at 17. And so told my story. And remind you, this was before there was an Office of Victim Services. And they asked me, are they still incarcerated? I said, I don't know. I don't know how to find out. Yeah, I hadn't really been to all of them. I've only been to the last 2 since I found out. And they said, we'll teach you how to find out. Next day, I found out. I didn't know there was an Office of Victim Services with the prisons. And I was able to find out that they were both still incarcerated. And one of them was about to have a parole hearing. December 28th, yes, Christmas week, and we were in November at that time. I'm like, I can go to it, can't I? They go, yes, you can. Wait a minute, I can speak, I can give a victim impact statement, can't I? Yes, you can. So I was gonna move heaven and earth. My mom and 2 sisters still lived out here in Orange County. Called them up, hey, can you guys drive to San Diego, give a victim impact statement? Well, there's 3 people in my family who had never, ever had any therapy. And they all told me no. They refused. So I planned a flight out to Orange County. My office my company that I worked for actually closed my office for 3 days so I could fly out, testify, and fly back. A friend of mine contacted the Register and tried to talk to the editor about why a 34-year-old homicide is still relevant. And they gave that story to Larry Wellborn, who's since retired. He was a young cub reporter 34 years previously who had been at my house covering the homicide. He thought it was an important story to tell. He had it put on the front page of the Register. So then Dr. Nick from Marcy's Law, reading the Register, finds it. Let's just say that all of a sudden, I'm not alone. Also, before this, when I found out I was going, I went onto Facebook. And most of my friends on Facebook were friends from high school. And you don't ever mention someone's worst day, so no one ever brings up the homicide. And I wrote a big thing that I need your help. I need a lot of letters written to the parole board. We need to keep this man incarcerated. Oh, and does anyone have any miles they can donate so I can get out here? People came out of the woodwork to help me. They go, yes, this bothered us too. My family moved out of Anaheim after that. I mean, it was incredible. I wasn't alone. I had people I could talk to. My family you couldn't talk to because everyone's in a 6-foot pit. And if you're in your own 6-foot pit, you can't help anyone else out of their 6-foot pit. So I was going to move heaven and earth. And I was going to fly out on the 27th, testify on the 28th, fly back on the 29th. And then back east where I was living, a storm decided to come up. And I called my representative from Marcy's Law and I said, hey, I've got rights now. If I get snowed in, can we get this changed, postponed? He said, no, change your flight. So I did. And I flew in on Christmas Eve. My daughters and I celebrated Christmas on the 23rd. We had Chinese food, like in the Christmas Story. It was all very last minute, but we pulled this off. So about 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve, I show up, and a representative from RC's Law was there to pick me up, along with someone named Todd Spitzer. And I'm like, it's Christmas Eve. Don't you guys have kids? Aren't you supposed to be asleep? Santa might come. And, you know, we don't want to ruin that for your kids. So I wasn't alone. I had amazing help. I had a wonderful attorney, Michael Fell, who was supposed to be here today but couldn't. And for the first time, like I said, I wasn't alone. And I went to that prison and I faced him down. Little apprehensive when I had to sign the form that said that I knew if I was abducted, they were not going to negotiate for my release. I'm like, okay, well, I've got a team here. I've come this far. Let's sign the form. Let's go on in. And I faced this guy down for the first time in 34 years. I saw this guy. And mind you, I had done a little more thank you. The research I had done prior to this on the Orange County DA's website, it was the Department of Prisons correct site. I found out that the average lifer spends 34 years incarcerated. This guy was expecting to get out. Well, he found out I was going to show up, and I hadn't been to any of the others. No one had, because that form you fill out to be notified didn't exist in '77. So now I've got the form filled out, by the way. So he found out at the last minute I was going to be there. He fired the state's attorney, hired outside counsel, got the whole thing postponed. We played cat and mouse for about a year, and then I showed up at his parole hearing. And it was denied. Yay. It was only a 5-year denial. Not to lie, I was disappointed it wasn't the 15. I was sadly disappointed, but that's okay. I've gone back. Last one was 7. But when I walked out of that parole hearing, I was different. And I knew that I was different. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. Thank you. And not only was I a survivor, but my voice had power. And your voices all have power. Whether you have an opportunity to speak and voice your power, or vote and voice your power, your voice has power. Thank you.
You're the best. That was so good.
Lynette, thank you for joining us today. At this time, we're going to hear from our District Attorney, Todd Spitzer, with some closing remarks. Todd?
Would you please give a big round of applause to all of our guest speakers today, please, please? I want to thank all the folks that put this together today. It's incredible, it's meaningful. Sean was right, this wasn't here last year, and it's such a fitting tribute to be here in this courtyard. It's just great to see all of you here. One of the themes today is very, very important to me that we walk away from. And the theme is, we'll never leave our victims. There are people here who conduct parole hearings and restitution hearings long after a person is sentenced. With the support of Waymakers and crime survivors and Crime Victims United of California, we are here for the victims. And I'm just so proud of the 900 individuals that work in the Orange County District Attorney's Office, the work you do every day. The work you do is phenomenal. The lawyers here, the investigators, the support staff, these people need us. We are responsible for the criminal justice system and walking them through that system. It's our job never to leave their side. And quite frankly, I'm appalled that anybody could advocate that our job is done upon sentencing. That's offensive to me. I'm troubled by that. When I started here over 30 years ago, we always staffed parole hearings, and as long as I'm here, we will always staff parole hearings. We will always be there for the victims. And even though the California Department of Corrections and the Parole Hearing Board has now made every hearing virtual, it's not the same. For those of you who do parole hearings, you know when you're sitting there like Lynette Duncan and you're confronting the killer in the same room, that has great psychological impact on the hearing officers. And so when the sheriff in his video talks about the changes in state law and what we're up against now, and how we don't have the same tools to fight like we did in the past, he's right. And so they changed the rules at the Department of Corrections and the parole hearings by making hearings virtual. They're removing that psychological impact of Lynette Duncan seeing her killer of her family after 34 years. That is dramatic, it's impactful, it's necessary. And it's lost virtually, it's lost. It's not the same. And we've got to fight to get back, now that we're out of the pandemic, we need to fight to get live parole hearings again so our victims, if they choose to be in those parole hearings, those commissioners not only need to hear it through the computer, they need to feel it. So as we embark on Crime Victims Week as a nation, I want to make two announcements of other things we're going to be doing as well. Tomorrow, I will be at the Board of Supervisors in front of our chairman and the other 4 supervisors, asking the Orange County Board of Supervisors to designate a special prosecutor from the Orange County District Attorney's Office who will be working in the United States Attorney's Office as one of our employees supervised by them to solely prosecute fentanyl murders in Orange County. Fentanyl murders. If the legislature is not going to support us on going after murderers who are furnishing fentanyl, then we're going to take advantage of the 20-year mandatory minimum that the federal government has, but it's going to be an Orange County prosecutor working in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we need to get that tomorrow passed. And on Friday, you're welcome to join us on the parking garage roof. My cousin is a producer of films, and when he started in the film industry, he was lucky enough to work at Universal and started when the Fast and Furious series was in its infancy. Street racing is killing our young people. It is devastating our communities. We have a street racing task force, but we have got to stop young people driving like they think they're race car drivers in our communities and taking over intersections and killing innocent people. So I called my cousin and he agreed that he would talk to the actors from Fast and Furious and they would decide if they would participate in a public service announcement to be released on Crime Victims Week this year to warn the nation that what they do in those movies is acting. It is not real. It's on a controlled course with educated and experienced drivers, and to knock it off. So Sun Kang, who is a featured star, did a PSA for us. And Paul Walker's brother closes out the PSA. And we're releasing it nationally on Friday to every single law enforcement in this country to show it nationally. And we did it, we produced it, we executed it, and it will be free for every law enforcement agency in the entire country by the stars who are most well known for driving fast and furious, but they are warning our young people. We are actors, this is not real. So let me thank you for coming. Let me make sure it's unequivocally clear. I met Lynette, 15 years ago, Patricia almost 30 years ago, some of you decades ago. Our work never ends. This is a monument, not a memorial. That's an important distinction. We have victims who passed, and we have victims who are alive today, like Lynette or Patricia, who have to live with the grief every single day. It is our responsibility to acknowledge them and to fight for them and to keep them in our presence. And every day when we walk through these gates, we get to see this. And it's not just an edifice. It's not just a symbol. It is a living, breathing place that acknowledges hurt and frustration and anger. And it is up to the victims to decide how they want to process that in their lives. One of our victims says, "I don't want to have hate in my heart." It is a miserable existence to live with hate in your heart. And Lynette said, "He didn't know me from Adam, but that was destroying me internally as a victim." We can forgive, but that doesn't mean we don't seek justice. And Lynette's right. There's a huge distinction between grace and forgiveness and doing justice. God bless doing justice. God bless the work we do. God bless the fact you get up every day and you fight for these victims. And God bless the fact that the victims support us and people in this county still support our police and law enforcement. God bless our law enforcement. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Godspeed, God go with you. And let's understand that we'll always be there. And just Reverend Moon, I just want you to know, he sang the national anthem. It was incredibly beautiful. He substituted in today, and he did that, one of the best national anthems I've ever heard. I'm going to put his name in to sing at an Angels game. I just want you to know, okay? All right, God bless you all. Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to release the doves. Todd, if you'd like to come forward with all of the victim speakers and their attorneys that accompanied them, if you can all come forward. We're proud to be joined by our OCDA pipes and drums. When we commence the music and when the music starts, we're going to release the doves. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our ceremony today.